You got to have people that are in charge of it, that are managing it. You got to have a process for whatever happens, and then you got to have some security products when you're in IT security. So those are the pieces that we're looking for. And go fast for this because I definitely want you to ask questions. All right, importance. What we found is, has anyone heard of the internet? With the advent of the internet, and it's now in every single place, it gives an advantage to the threat actors, the people who are using the internet to attack. It gives them a 24/7, 365-day platform to go at people. And it is proving to be very lucrative for the ones who are good at this. Some of the things we talked about up here, identity theft, monetary theft, loss of use of systems, these are things that are caused when we don't take cyber or don't take it seriously enough. And one of them I had here, low public perception. I'll talk in a little bit. I'll talk about some local Oregon institutions who found out about cybersecurity the hard way, and a lot of times that can leave you in a bad position, especially when we're being charged to protect, to advise the public. And then according to SANS Institute, the top vectors, a lot of people think, when they think of cybersecurity, they think of what we call a threat actor, or we think of a hacker, right? They think of the kid in the basement with the hood on and the dark thing, and they're just trying to get in the firewall. It might surprise you that the number one way that people are hacked today, whether it's corporations or institutions or municipalities, is through known system vulnerabilities that had a patch already out. They just didn't patch their stuff. And this is prevalent everywhere. This is why it requires a managed security solution to be able to keep your security. What we talk about with security is we want to raise your security posture, where you're at, and lower your risk. Security is like risk mitigation. But hacking through a firewall is one. The second one, if anyone's curious, the most popular is phishing attacks, email phishing attacks, using social engineering, which I'll explain in a minute, and going after people pretending to be somebody else, right? Here's a good example why we should pay attention. So this one I got a little involvement in. Until I paid $300,000 ransomware. One interesting thing exciting about that one is not only did they pay the ransom, they were down for several weeks. During this, their systems were down for almost 4 weeks. Huge problems, a lot of heads rolled. We had a lot of applications coming into the Eugene area for IT specialists. But it was a big deal, and that's a big number for them. The city of Kaiser recently, in 2020, paid $48,000 ransomware. They did not get all their data back on that. They got most of it back. Usually, the ratio right now, depending on what sector you're in, the chance of getting all your data back when you pay the ransom, if you believe, is about 0. 27% of the time, the ransom is paid and they get nothing. And then there's variations of that. And then recently, February of this year, Lynn County had an attack. They had to restore a bunch of information. They were down for just over a week. So it's happening local. I could give you a dozen examples of Eugene businesses. It's the same type of deal. It is happening. It is important, and so we got to figure out how do we address this. One of the ways that people are getting in, I told you, is social engineering, right? This is manipulating people into thinking that you are somebody that you're not. This is a big one right now. The threat actors out there, they're mining internets. Right, and this is one reason why on your internet you don't want to, on your web page, you don't want to put your web page, and they'll mine it and they'll say, oh, that's Bill the CEO and John the CFO. So I've got the president and the controller. And oh look, Bill, I go on Bill's Facebook page, and they'll notice that Bill is currently posting pictures from his diving down in Cabo. And then they'll go in and they'll fake to be Bill, and they'll send an email from Bill to John and say, John, I'm down here having fun in Cabo, but I really want to do something special for all the employees. Let's give everybody a $200 gift card. Did you get those purchased? Did you send me the codes? I'm going to start sending them out. This is going to be great. By the way, I've got no cell service down here, so you're not going to be able to call me, but I need this done. And one thing leads to another, and this happens every single day. About 20 grand of cards get sent off to somebody else. Okay? Social engineering. I'll tell you another more local story. My client in Eugene, or actually in Springfield, who's going to be unnamed, but this is why. My client had a customer. They sent that customer an invoice for $22,000. And the customer said, okay, great, we'll get that paid. The way they do that is they go in and they have a bank account. They go ahead and transfer the money and pay the $22,000 invoice. They've been doing this for years with this customer. My client sent them an invoice by email, said, here's your invoice. Their email had been hacked by a threat actor. Threat actor saw that email come in from my client, intercepted that email, took it, redid it, sent it back to the same customer saying, hey, this is my client, and we didn't tell you, but we just changed all our bank accounts. Here are new routing numbers for our new bank accounts. Guess what? Customer wired $22,000 into some hacker's account, and then, this was the best part, they called my client. Mad. Well, let's review this. My client's systems were completely secured. We sent them a legal email. We were not involved in any way. They just were hacked, and they got, but it didn't matter, right? It didn't matter. What happened because of this is my client ended up, we redid all of their invoicing procedures, and now to this day, they have a process where when they invoice, there has to be a verbal confirmation with that client before any bank account transfer is made because of this incident, where we had no culpability. This is how far it's getting, and it's getting really bad, okay? One of the things that Jim said, I didn't have a lot of time, I wanted to kind of teach. I love to teach. My wife would say I love to talk, but I'd say I love to teach. And just to give you guys something to go away with, passwords. Everyone, when you're in IT, people ask you IT questions, typically family members. Everyone asks you IT questions. What do I do for passwords? Okay, the number one tip for a password is a password manager. These are very inexpensive, if not free. They're secure, you get the right one, and they will store all your passwords for you and make it very easy to use them. Password managers, computers are really good at keeping passwords, and humans suck at it. That's just the bottom line. So we use our computers to manage those. Come up with a really good password for your password manager, and all your other passwords need to be random, okay? I was just showing this screen here, the highlighted yellow. One of the things I'm talking about in the next screen is one of my recommendations, and today's what we call the security standard, is at least 14 characters on your password, okay? 14 characters. If you see here from the screen that if your password is 8 characters, they can hack it in 3.4 minutes with a brute force attack. If it's 12 characters or more, alphanumeric, that goes to 500 years. Any questions? So at least then you passed your tenure, so you wouldn't have to worry about it. Okay, 14 characters, contain alphanumeric. Don't use your pet's name. Every hacker knows that little Jack, by the way, is the most popular dog name in the world. Little Jack is going to be your password, or some combination of that, and they will start with, they'll go to your Facebook, they'll find your dog's name, they'll find your mom's name, they'll find your maiden name, and they'll start, and it'll take them only 10 minutes to hack your password. So use complex passwords, use a password manager, and then if you set up on your computer, it's really easy to just substitute that password. So most password programs, you go to your website and you hit, I want to log in, and your password manager comes up, it puts in the password, which is 2947#23. You don't care because you don't need to type it in. That's going to be more and more secure. Here's the last tip on passwords. A lot of people don't realize this. When you're at home, and you're doing your banking, and you go to that website, you ever notice how when you go back to a site, it knows you were there? Right? It doesn't ask you to put the name, just the password in. Sometimes it doesn't ask you for the name or the password, it just lets you in. It's because it's caching those passwords. And those cached passwords are on your C drive. Okay? And anybody that gets into your computer and knows what they're doing can go get your bank account passwords. Don't save them in the browser. Clear the browser, get a password manager, protect yourself. Any questions on that? We'll do that really fast. Absolutely important that we learn how these passwords are working. Online, this is another one I like to show. You see that it's really important that when you go to a site, if you go to a bank, that you go and you look that there's a secure, you're doing a secure browser. All right, HTTPS. Sometimes you see the little block, little yellow block. That means that you have a secure connection from there to the place that you're going to. So you always want to check for that. And then, so it's not. All right, you guys are a city, right? So before we get into Cresswell's specifics, I wanted to just kind of talk a little bit about cities in general and kind of take a look at how other cities and other councils, when I was preparing for this, I thought, what would I want to tell you guys? So I found this. This is actually right out of the National League of Cities annual report on cybersecurity. And if it's too small up there, what they found, that little yellow half pie is the key. 29% of all of the respondents, and the respondents were elected officials, said 29%. Okay? And then you have the other ones up there, 17%. And this is not like City of Portland. The majority of these respondents were less than 10,000, less than 50,000 people in their city. These are small cities all across the country on the lower end. And so I wanted you to just kind of see this because I wanted you to see how some city leaders are addressing and how not only are you needing to address it, but you're going to start being accountable, right? I wonder what the next council meeting was like after Tillamook or after Salem or after Marion County had a problem. So I want to get you guys ahead of the curve and we can start looking at this. One of them is going to sound kind of brash, or it's going to sound, I guess, selfish. We've got to put some money to these, okay? And I'll talk about a little example here in a second that I think will really make this clear. Here's the current status. Next Gen firewall. Next Gen is a great thing. They have new firewalls now where the antivirus talks to the firewall. So if you're on a computer and that antivirus gets something caught or it detects something, it tells the firewall and the firewall shuts everything down at the firewall. Its communication is called Next Gen. You guys have that here. It's great. Endpoint protection. Endpoint means that everything that touches the network here has an agent on it for security. You guys have that in place. Continuous patching. I told you the #1 way that we get hacked is patching, not being done. So you guys have a managed services contract with a great company that you who is that? Oh, Step Up. Step It Up. Yeah, we get called Step It Up all the time. It's no problem. It's a long story. Step Up IT is a managed services provider. One of our jobs is to make sure that your stuff is patched continuously. And we have agents on every single device that gives us a warning if any patch does work or if it's out of date. And then our engineers respond to that right away. So that's you've already got that in place. The #1 way to recover from a failed or a breach incident is by backup. That's because the perpetrators will come in and they'll encrypt your data. You've got to restore it. You guys have a backup system that actually detects cryptoware, and you have a backup system that is fully recoverable from offsite or onsite. So we've got 3 areas of backups covered for you guys. Multi-factor authentication. This is one that you don't have. This is one you need. Everyone knows MFA, right? You go to the bank and says, all right, give me I just texted you a number, type it in. It's a secondary confirmation of who you are, and it's the most inexpensive, best way to raise your security posture and lower your risk. It's very inexpensive to roll out MFA, especially an email. We should do it right away. We've got some plans here. We're talking about it with Jim and getting that in the budget to just get that rolled out. It's one that we want. Also, cyber insurance is starting to require it. So they say if you don't have MFA rolled out, then we're not going to pay your cyber claim. And more cyber insurance people are starting to do that. User awareness training. You got to keep everybody up to where the user is the last piece, right? The user is the last defense against this. And so we use user awareness training, and we recommend this here. Jim does some internal stuff where they have different times that they meet, etc. But you can do an ongoing program where we send fake emails, phishing emails to you and to your users and say, hey, this is Walmart, click here for your free gift card. And then when you click on it, it goes, this was a fake, Step Up got you, had this been a real emergency. And what it does is now the user goes, oh, God, and then they have to take this little remediation video. Oh, I could have known if I looked up there and I saw that little thing in the corner, I didn't see it. Then we send them another one and they go, oh, wait, that looks like one of those. And we've done what we need to do. They're aware. They're starting, before I click, I'm going to now, it's going to make me think. I'm not just going to click, I'm going to think. And that's what you want. You want to get that awareness. Talked about a password manager, managed detection response. This is the big one. Managed detection and response. This is the key defense that most cities are lacking. Okay, this I want to give you. I have my example here. Let me go here. Here we go. I'm going to give you this analogy. These are the 5 phases of cyber: identify, protect, detect, respond, recover. I add a 6th one, repeat, because it just keeps going. The analogy I came up with that I like to show is the analogy of the risk of this building catching on fire. Okay, this building, there is a risk that it can catch on fire. What is that risk? Well, let's think about it. We've got fire extinguishers in all the common areas. We have smoke alarms. They're all up. We've got a lot of fire-resistant materials we had to use and put in here. We're keeping the heaters out of people's under their desks. Correct, Roberta? Okay. We lock the door so nobody comes in and lights things on fire. We have a hotline set up. It's called 911. You can call it right away. We have insurance. The city of you have insurance on this that you can, if all these other things fail, you can get the insurance. You have safety training, all these things. You probably have a good rate on your insurance because of your proximity to a fire department. That's when you should. All these things, when we talk about fire, when we talk about preventing fire, these are all expensive. This building costs a lot more money because the materials they made us use. I was in on the design of this room. Absolutely, I saw it actually with my eyes. It makes us think about the costs. Cybersecurity is the same idea, but for some reason, I can't get people to understand cybersecurity like they understand fire insurance. Okay, we need to be thinking about the negative business aspects, the negative problems that will happen in the cyber. The same as a fire, just like a smoke detector. Why don't we have a ransomware detector? Why don't we put a ransomware detector on our network? That's that expensive one that I talked about. It's relatively expensive. That's the bigger cost one. The MDR, Managed Detection Response. It's just something that's going to detect if we have ransomware in our system. Why don't we train our personnel how to avoid security, just like we train them how to get out of the building if there's a fire alarm, right? Why don't we have a fire department ready on the hook with a 911 number if we do have an incident? Do you know that if you have a breach, an actual breach, what you do in the first 12 hours of that breach and how you do that is going to dramatically increase the cost of that breach, the legality problems with that breach, and the length that you're down. The first 12 hours. And you can't spend that time to just start thinking about it. That's when you have to come in, you have to have a plan, you have to have the professionals ready to come in. We're going to say, okay, what do we got? It's an incident, it's an actual breach. I see that hand.
So should you delete the file right away?
You should not.
Oh, no.
Is huge, okay. We call it a incident response plan because in cyber world training, you never say the word except in circumstances. Because as soon as anyone at the city, anyone, by the way, if you guys ever have an incident, you're called in and you're talking about someone, you didn't have a breach, you had an incident. We're investigating an incident. That's it. Until we prove that somebody broke in, breached, and something was stolen, it's an incident. And you get legally in trouble as a city if you say we have a breach. Because now, if you say it, you have it, whether you have it or not. There's a whole legal thing in Oregon that they've been fighting over this. But I just want you to kind of understand it like the fire, right? We need to have these systems in place. And then we need to have cyber insurance, just like insurance here. If everything else fails, we want to have a fallback to mitigate this risk, right? So that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to overcome the negative business aspects of a full-on breach. And we want to mitigate that risk, just like we mitigate fire risk. Almost done. Next steps. These are the things that we're recommending. The multi-factor, like I said, is already in the works. Q2 of 2023. Provide secure encrypted password manager, plan for Q4 of this year. Roll out cybersecurity awareness, Q4 of this year. Is that right? Yeah. Okay. I was thinking that was next quarter. And then a couple like security vulnerability, right? There's an old saying, sailors say the first step to getting where you want to go is figuring out where the heck you are. All right? Same thing in cybersecurity. If we want to know we want to be at this level of security, where are we at now? And then we can do a delta and say what's it going to take to get to here. And we can see what that means by budget, time, etc. And then you can go into this plan. That's what your team behind, fortunately for the city, your city manager and finance director have been very proactive in the cyber area. They've worked with Kayala to get a lot of the teams going, and we're continuing to do that. But I just want you guys to understand the importance of it and why we're doing it. It's not that we just want money. It's cyber insurance, cyber security has grown huge today, and it's taking companies, cities, counties down every day. So it's not a scare tactic. It's just a fact. So we want to make sure that we continue to do these things, and I want you guys to kind of understand what these are. Third-party vulnerability scanning. That's like we want to do a test. So every so often, you can come in and, in fact, Step Up doesn't do that test. We bring somebody else and we say, test how we do it, right? You know, the Fox Garden and that's what we want. And then they're going to show us here's where you're vulnerable. So we'll do a gap analysis. We'll plug those holes, and we're going to make you guys more secure on that same budget. I've already told you develop an incident response plan. Everybody needs first 12 hours are critical. MDR, that's that. The piece that detects. You get that into the system. We don't have a plan for that one yet. I'm going to say that we would be highly recommending that goes into next year's budget to get an MDR in place because it's if you're not detecting, remember that cycle? Go back to that cycle, the circle. When you get to detection, that's the one where a lot of people break down. They have big firewalls in place and antivirus and everything else, but they forget to check if somebody broke in, and that takes a full-time person to be watching that, right? 24/7. So when it detects and the little alarm goes off, it's like a fire department. You got to have somebody there 24/7 to respond to that, and that's expensive having that person sit there, right? That's why that's more expensive. Build security policies. Won't get into all of the policies policies, but there are a lot of security policies, password policy, home use policy, where you can go to protect yourself again, to mitigate your risk. You want to mitigate the legal risk. You want to have policies in place, security policies that says. And Dave, Jim's done a number of these. I think there's a few that we still lack that we've identified. He's done a number of those. Right on. All right, fast questions. Anything? You already had your turn.
Should we just pee and buy more insurance?
If I get to retire in the process, absolutely. No, I know you're saying it tongue in cheek, but you would be surprised how they go, well, we've got a lot of cyber insurance. I'm like, really? So do you have a lot of fire insurance? So you don't use any fire extinguishers, you don't smoke, you're just gonna go right to, we'll pay when it burns down. Oh, that's a great plan. No, let's do all the other things, and that's catch-all is, man, if we just, you know, sometimes lightning strikes. And we tried everything, we can't make it perfect, but we can raise our security posture. We're gonna make it very low risk, and that's where we wanna run. And then we try and give you good ideas that are biggest bang for your buck. But no, the cyber insurance, by the way, your cyber insurance is a little bit low. Galen, I look at that. I would bump that based on the average cost of one of the things a lot of people don't realize in cyber attack, and breach especially. They think, oh, the average ransom is X $100,000 or whatever it is. That's what I need. There's two other big costs. One is it's going to cost you a lot of money to get all your systems back. Not you just have to pay the ransom, but often there's a lot of rebuilding that has to happen or restored or something. It can cost a lot. And the third one is you got to put in place something to stop what got you breached in the first place. Right? There's a reason they got in, and often that's because this application, this old application, wasn't patched because it can't be patched. Well, now we got to get that application. Are we going to run and just let somebody else break in? No, we got to, and it's going to cost us, you know, a lot of money to get that thing very quickly fixed. The reason it's not fixed now is because it had a high price tag. So now it forces you to do all these things all at once. So what we recommend is let's spread these out. Let's get all these coverages in place that will prevent and raise our security posture.
Yeah, I would say that the last two insurance conferences we've had with CIS, they've stressed that you can't just buy more insurance. They've said you have to do this and this and this before we'll even give you more insurance.
Yeah, they're putting things in place where they won't even sell you insurance if you don't get a certain amount.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's exactly right. Well, they're putting clauses in where they don't pay if you don't answer the questions right. I do have one. This is an extra slide. This list came directly from the Oregon League of Cities and their cyber team and their recommendations for Oregon cities. And so this is, I mean, you see the highlighted ones are the ones we've already talked about. Everybody's kind of saying the same thing in cybersecurity. You're either running off the NIST standard or CIS standard. Those are the standards that we make the litmus test against, right? What is secure? All right. Any other questions? Yes.
So we had a pretty interesting council discussion a few months back related to devices and such. And so I think I can hear everybody like, oh no, not today. Shut up. So, and I think that at the end of the discussion, it was kind of like everybody was going to kind of approach it based on their particular needs. So while I think that most folks here don't really care about being able to have their email available to them on their phone, I in particular think it would be handy to do. So in terms of doing that, do you recommend a solution where you're managing like a managed device solution where somebody could put Outlook on their phone and there, and if something happens and they're let go, then you remote wipe that piece of it or whatever? Or do you just recommend a separate phone?
But also, you have a lot, when people start finding is we've doubled our chances of losing a phone, so it kind of, you're kind of trading 6 of one, half of the other. We recommend mostly that people go, if they don't have enough, you know, a lot of times you say, I'm not going to use my home phone. Well, you don't always, you know, you don't have to see email. You don't. It can be a choice. You don't have to. But if you do want to, my philosophy, I'm a system administrator for 50 companies, is the information that is currently on your phone in email form is city property, and it's my job to protect that from a security standpoint, from an extraction standpoint. I have to protect that. So I would say the ease of use, because I want you to use your email, because the whole reason productivity and security are always opposite, right? The more productive we are, the less secure it seems. The more secure, the less productive. So we want to strike a balance. And for most corporations that I manage, that good balance is use personal devices, have an MDM, you mentioned the mobile device, have an MDM agent on that device, and all it does is, if that device is stolen or break it down or whatever, there's a problem, then we can just extract that data and wipe that remotely. And that also, when you add an MDM to a device like that, it adds encryption to the email. So if someone does try to hack it and they're able to jailbreak the phone, they still can't get into those emails because it's encrypted. So the first time they turn the phone on, the system's going to extract all the email off there with a mobile device manager, and that's what we recommend.
I know that folks could access it just through the web, through Outlook.
Absolutely,
But
web access.
what I don't like about that is that you don't get all the features of Outlook itself, notifying you when you have an email or something like that. So I've always been kind of interested in the idea of possibility. Now, is that something that, if I'm the only one that really wants that, I don't know if that's really cost productive or effective, I should say, to do here at Crestwell, or is that something that can be done on an individual basis and not cost effective?
What do they have a Surface and a day 365?
365, almost no Intune or an MDM manager, and we usually do it at scale. So I think you're right; it's more beneficial when it's the whole company or managing everybody centrally. That's really what our organization is for. As one person, a one-off, a special consideration.
Okay, cool. That helps me because then I will quit pestering Jim and Michelle.
Great.
and the council. So thank you.
I will add to that question, Councilor Pranchu, and this is a good time to ask these questions. I didn't hear it discussed, but we are looking at a server replacement, and so I think next fiscal year we have to replace the server. It's going to be out of warranty, and these are the bells and whistles we need to think about before we design and implement that new server. So these are great questions. Ask away, please. We need to know this before we design.
Yeah, because email is always integrated. Your email is 365, which is Microsoft. So the best way, the best MDM is using Microsoft MDM. That's what we always talk about. It would be a challenge to do that for one person, although it could be done. I guess I would push back a little bit and say, why don't? If there is a value to have an email on the phone, a real value, is that it all comes down to risk and the value, right? If it's worth the cost. If it's not worth the cost, then we don't do it. Personally, right now, if I had extra budget at Crestwell, I'd be doing some of these other key security things and get them in place, and then down the road, we'll be more poised with an MDM solution already in place that we can roll out. In the meantime, Outlook Web Access is a great way to do it. I use that for years. If you haven't been in there a while, it's pretty functional. Or we talk about, if it's one user, maybe the cost of an extra phone for that user. Again, that's a solution because it's not across the board. If everybody on board wants it, then it becomes cost prohibitive.
And what we recommend to cities and all our businesses too is like give them business devices.
Yeah.
That's always preferred to navigating that personal device line. What's city? It's a business use or city use. What's your personal use? Where's that line drawn? It's always tough when you bring your own device.
We have this question often when we're doing with MFA, for multi-factor authentication. And most people are okay because it's a generic authenticator, just like your bank doesn't take over your phone. We just send a code to your phone, so they don't mind using a Google authenticator or a text-based authentication. But we have some people, we do the Bend Park and Rec District, and they have a number of people that I hope I'm not touching my phone. So, okay, we can use a key fob. It costs a little more, but there are other solutions. The nice thing is you're not the only ones dealing with this, and everybody is looking at options. So right now there are so many different solutions. I think the key tonight is to just be the awareness that this is the social engineering, the hackers, all these things are, well, I'd say 8 times higher than they were 3 years ago. 8 times higher than they were 3 years ago. The average cost of a breach has gone up 4 times. So 4 times more. And so that's why your cyber insurances are going up, and that's why the insurance company has 2 choices: charge more premium or not let you, don't insure you, right? And so they're doing both. And That's what insurance companies do, they make money. But that, you can just kind of see that they're leading the industry. That's why we get these questionnaires from insurance companies saying, do you do this? Because they know if you do that, you reduce your risk for them to have to pay out somewhere in the future. So it's very important one. They have no stake in the game other than they're going to not have a breach. They're going to be pretty smart about it. And one of them is MDMs, right? And that mobile device gets compromised, you got to have a way of that. Good questions.
Do you have a password locker recommendation? I know you've recommended one for me, and I'm using it, and I love it. Like I copy paste passwords, and I don't have to remember any of them. I'm using MyGlue.
Yeah. I just wasn't sure which one you had.
Do you have any recommendations to the council?
Okay. Well, so MyGlue is through the city. You get, I mean, so they can get it through the city that way, or just get it, you know,
Users.
right? But if they're not,
Well, we all have the tablets, right? We're doing email.
you all have city tablets?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, then we could just do MyGlue on city tablet. Yeah.
There's lots of popular personal ones out there. 1Password is a big one. LastPass.
LastPass is a consumer-based one.
I use LastPass personally myself. MyGlue is our corporate solution, so we'll give that all to there was a personal email address and provide that for you. It's better for the business level, but a lot of solutions. 1Password.
Those would be the
Costs, are they pretty nominal?
Reasonable. I pay $50-$60 a year. I think we're saying $2 a user for the corporate one.
Yep.
A month.
One of the advantages of the corporate one is that you can then share passwords with other people. So if you wanted the whole group to have access to something, it needs to have shared password, you have that ability.
And we have passwords for a lot of things ourselves at Christmas, so we share that with Jim, so he's in the know. We're very transparent about what's going on. We hold them hostage. It's you guys ready. We want, it's a partnership. We're in together.
Okay, thank you very much. So let's take a 5-minute recess and you direct whatever you need to do, and we'll come back and stormwater.
Yeah. Glad to see that.
At least 3 times a month, you send me on the commission. Yes, I get those all the time. Oh, yeah.
Just like generate code.
I've had that happen before. I got you figured out.
Yeah, you keep looking at it.
Thank you.
Yeah, and that's where you have to put a code to our password. And so it'll remember all your settings. Migrate to
Oh, one more.
Okay. I'm sorry. Technology. We are.
This machine is not shut off.
Yeah.
By the public.
So I've got it.
Even if it's turned on.
I know, that's kicking it at me right now too. I got into this.
You have tea there.
Yeah. It's not that big. Plus all the coffee that drank all day long.
Well, I have to tell you, I like 11.
Oh, 11 at night or?
No, 11 before that. Any kind of caffeine.
Yeah. So I think having a lot of it all the time is almost like the day to eat too, because that thing will start to have coffee. And it gets all buzzed, so you need to up your tolerance. Yeah. Okay. That's what we do. Well,
They don't.
Now, this is caffeine like later on Friday.
Stay up and watch a movie or whatever.
Well, I they keep that with me.
This is almost like 10:30, 11 o'clock.
I get a pie.
Yeah, it's sucking. It wants you to
And I'm working out.
Yeah, yeah. No.
There should be an option
Yeah. Might be just because
We
this is
put a lot of headsets. We might have to work 9 to 15.
what is
Clients who we-
Well, they-
COVID hit, they're gonna get
Maybe
through
for
it.
that, but it- And if you're using alcohol to do it, house operations, that's, I think, is what it's called.
It's
That big thing that you're on.
Oh,
But
okay.
if you use the program, it's called the app. The app is nice because you get all the notifications.
Okay, ready? Here we go. Here we go.
Sure.
Yeah. Hi, Daryl. Good to see you.
Yeah, you just grab a webcam.
Okay, you ready?
Getting a little bit of technical setup here.
Okay, okay. All right, ready now? All right, we're coming together again. We're going to be on item 3B, Stormwater Master Plan Presentation by West Texas Engineering. Great. Great.
Yes, good evening. And I guess I don't need to introduce myself, but thank you, Mayor, Council, and staff members. I am Ray Engel with West Texas Engineering, and I'm going to cover a number of things, so please feel free to jump in and ask questions at any point in time. So let's see if we can. I'm really going to go put things in two categories. There's a lot of slides related to the first category, calculations. What I'm really trying to convey to you with that is the things that are involved in the numbers that come down to the end, and we say, this is how much water you get, and this is how much water that you need to manage. et cetera. And there's quite a few different factors in those. And one of the things that I want to make clear as I can communicate this is the picture on the slide is a switch watch. Your stormwater system is not a switch watch. There's a lot of different pieces to it, but rather than highly precise, people, when they think of engineers, they think of lots of decimal places and things like that. I typically like to say that if you're talking about stormwater, realistically, if you come up with a number of less than such, you really probably know what you're talking about within 20 to 25%. Those are the kinds of approximations, and I hope to convey the reasons why that's true. And yet, when all is said and done, it still all comes out in the wash, so that the number that you get is a useful number for you as you're trying to figure out how to make your system do what you want it to do, which is get the stormwater where you want it to go. So, when you talk about stormwater, the first thing that I want to talk about is the rainfall. We use a synthetic rainfall model in our computer modeling, and what that says is over a large number of storms, people have decided that we have storms kind of sometimes look like this, where you get a start, and then you get a peak of the rainfall, and then it tapers off over time. So that's the first approximation that we've got in trying to analyze stormwater, is we make up this, the whole story starts with this fictitious curve, and it's scaled to 1. If you added up all the rain that fell under that curve in a 24-hour period, and we use a 24-hour storm, and that's what we're doing our design based on, it equals to 1 inch. But that's not really the number that we're using in the analysis. They've done another type of analysis where they've looked at all of the historical rainfall data. These graphs are for all of the different states. This one happens to be for Oregon. And let me scroll down to make sure that I know which one I got. So this one says 2-year 24-hour precipitation. So what this is saying is you take this number, and if you want to know what a 2-year storm looks like, you go in and find where you are on the map, and then you look at these curves that are numbered, and they're basically in tenths of an inch. So if you say you're at 40, that means that in a 2-year storm, you're going to get 4 inches in 24 hours, but it's explicitly going to, basically you're going to scale that up so that the total amount in 24 hours is 4 inches or whatever it is that's appropriate. There's 2-year storms, there's 5-year storms, there's 10-year storms, 25, 50, and 100. So there's all kinds of different analysis that we do. We've used the 50-year storm for this because what we're really looking for is making sure that your system is sized for larger events. We could do the 500-year, but at some point you're paying more. It's kind of like your cybersecurity. And it's like how much protection do you need, and where's that balance? We've used the 50-year storm because we think that's appropriate. That's fairly typical in what we're doing. So we have water coming from the sky. We have a number for a 50-year storm. We spread it out over this 24-hour distribution. It gets to the ground. The first thing that happens when it gets to the ground is your ground has topography. It has shape to it, and water flows downhill. So we looked at your topography and broke out the city into different basins. And each of these different basins essentially has a final terminus or end where the water goes out independent of any other basin. So we're analyzing on a basin by basin basis. So for example, if you look at this K basin over here that discharges to I-5, all the water in this area IK eventually collects itself together in your system and goes out there. From the basin, for modeling purposes, we went ahead and broke things down a little bit more finely so that we could look at things in a little bit more detail and have a little bit better feel for the different parts of your system. One number at the bottom of your basin doesn't really tell you very much. You want to know what's going on, and you have 4 or 5 basins that are fairly long and complex. Yes.
So question, when you talk about basin, what do you mean? Do you mean that under the ground there?
No.
Or,
The surface.
okay.
So here is the bottom end of the sea basin. And again, if you look at these, they're 1 foot contours, and the water flows down here. It's going to get picked up. This is your storm drain system here. And this storm drain system all comes down and discharges at this location here. So the basin is a surface feature. Your topography and your stormwater infrastructure directs water into one particular location, but it is all, we're not interested, we're not tracking what's going on under the ground. We're only looking at what happens above the ground because that's what we're trying to convey in either pipes or ditches or whatever infrastructure we're using.
So then the basin is talking about the way the water is going to flow based on topography, and also on what we've got in place with stormwater drain, and the piping that's underground is going to move the water here, there, or wherever.
Correct.
So eventually it does that.
But it's not like a big bathtub underground that will collect
Okay.
water or anything like that. So that's essentially what we're analyzing. We've got the rainfall coming down, and now we're going to track it through these various parts and pieces. And again, the thing that's unique is that, oh, I pointed to the wrong thing there. C basin comes out here. You've got this other little basin over here, F. It comes through and comes out here. Your G basin. And the reason that we've got sub-basins and basins is that C3 feeds in and C2 adds to it. And so you get an additive flow. And in your C basin, if you went back to the earlier map, you can see that C comes clear back up here to Crestwell Butte and comes all the way down through here. And all of this, all the stormwater in this region all collects together bit by bit, and it ultimately discharges there. And as it collects together, it adds, and you need larger and larger infrastructure as you get further and further down the basin. So the next piece of the puzzle in trying to figure out how much water you're dealing with is the soils that you've got. And the simple way to describe this is, you all know that if rain falls on sand, it's going to soak right in. If it falls on a clay, it's all going to run right off. And so the Soil Conservation Service years and years ago mapped all of these different soils, and they all have, they've all been categorized A, B, C, and D, and there's some partials of those to go on, but mostly everything's A, B, C, and D. And so the red is a poor draining soil, meaning it's going to have lots of runoff. The green is a highly drained soil, like a sand or something that allows the water into the ground very easily. So this is the next level, so that you see the rain coming down, but how much actually comes off depends on whether it's an A, B, C, or D type of soil. And so that's another, and how accurate or how perfect is that? No, yeah.
So all that red is clay.
All that red is clay, but if you look at yours, you know, kind of where the city limits and the UGB areas that you're most interested in, you've got quite a bit of red. This is kind of this is what they call a CD. So it's in between a C and a D. But you've got quite a bit of B here. You've got some green over there. So you've got a little bit of each, but part of the picture there is how much rainfall you're going to get depends on where you are in town. It depends on the kind of soil that you've got in a particular basin.
What is yellow?
Yellow is that's a different yellow right there. Yellow would be B. Or C, I'm sorry. Let me get it straight. Yes. So green is A, yellow is B, orange is C, and red is D.
So depending on A, B, C, or D, how well it drains, A, really, really well, D, not good at all.
Correct.
Okay.
And then, again, that's just part of the input to the computer model that we're using to generate how much water is actually getting to your pipe system. Your soil is important, but so is what is being built on top of the soil. Is it a residential subdivision? Is it a park? Is it a residential subdivision with large lots? Is it downtown commercial where you've got lots of buildings and parking lots? And all of those things. So if you have sand and you put an asphalt parking lot on it, you're going to significantly change the runoff characteristics there. If you have a very poor draining clay and you put an asphalt parking lot on it, you're going to change it, but not by as much. So we have the land use characteristics for the city areas, and we also, because you have areas from the county that are feeding into the areas that flow through town, we had to go outside and you look at the land use areas for the county. All of that is kind of, again, we're trying to put these things into numbers. So here's our soil types, A, B, C, and D, and here's our land use, and now we give some kind of number to it because computers like numbers. And so you can see that the numbers range, they really can range all the way from like 30 to 100, but for the most part, what you see are numbers from the 70s into the 90s. But the change from, a number from 75 to 80 makes a fairly substantial difference in how much water runs off of your site. One last little piece of the puzzle is how the water runs off. And we use the language here is time of concentration. And so if you dump water, we'll just say you've got a piece of artificial turf, and it gives you a sense. If you put that on a piece of plywood and you dump water on it, it would have a lot of resistance to flow, and it would take a while for it to flow off. If you dump the water on a piece of stainless steel or something like that, it's going to go off quick. And so what happens is, the faster that it goes, you get higher peaks, but it rises and drops more quickly. If you've got a longer time of concentration, it tends to spread the flow out. So you don't get as high as peak, but you get higher flows for a little bit longer period of time here. But most of what you're concerned about is trying to manage that peak. So keeping your peak down is a useful thing. I'm going to jump back to something way back here and look at this. with regards to the time of concentration, because what we did is we calculated each of these sub-basins separately, and we dump it into the conveyance system, the pipes or the ditches or whatever. And so if this and this peak at the exact same time, locally, they don't peak at the exact same time because it takes a while for this water to get down to here. And so this might generate 1 CFS and this might generate 1 CFS. But when you add, and this is one of the few times that this really works, 1 plus 1 does not equal 2. Because by the time this travels down to here, it's accomplished some of that spreading and peak diminishment. So things spread out over time. So that's why we model it the way we do with our connected system and adding things together as they would add in time rather than instantaneously. So that's all of the background information that gets you to these maps, of which there's a whole series of these in the report. And I've just got one sample of this to explain what's going on. And it's basically, again, I'm going to put C8, I'm going to say it gets there, and then it's going to start flowing through the system. And it gives us numbers in the report here that say existing and max. And really, your most critical consideration is your max, and your existing and your future. So you've got your level of development playing into this, and so we have all these numbers. For the most part, what we're concerned with is whatever the biggest number you have there, and then we've compared that with the conveyance system. So here it says pipe 7, and if you find the right piece of the puzzle somewhere, wherever it happens to be, it tells you that pipe 7 is a 30-inch XYZ kind of pipe, whatever it happens to be, at a particular kind of slope, and that tells you how much conveyance it has. So then we color-coded and arrow-coded, and we did that so that if somebody does a black and white copy, you can still figure out what you're looking at. And as that piece of your system is old, you've got a potential problem there. So the green ones, the pipes are big enough. The yellow ones, the pipes are kind of borderline, and the red ones are the pipes are undersized. So that's what that part of the report is telling you. All of that then went into this, which is really the bottom line. We've essentially at this point, or in the last couple of slides, jumped to part 2 of the presentation is, so what do you need? Where do you need it? What does it look like for what your real needs are in your stormwater system? And overall, that's not very much compared to other communities. Things are actually in pretty good shape here. And I think that you have a natural feel for that because you probably don't get lots of flooding on a regular basis like some other communities do. So if I step through these really quickly, I can just kind of give you a quick summary of what's going on and what these different parts mean. And in this area, what you have is right here, is you have some old metal pipes running through the RV park. They're not easy to access, they're not in good shape. And basically the recommendation is you need some new pipes, and you need them in a place where you can get to them to work on them. And that's what is going on here. In this location, you have basically lack of facility. There's nothing there today. And this is just a reminder that says, hey, someday, if you're actually going to do a project on South Mill Street, you need to put some storm drainage in there. This one, there's some older pipes that are not in good condition, and they're, this is basically a replacement in that part there. This area is essentially underserved as well. There's not much there, or what little is there just really doesn't do much for you. So we're recommending that as you work in this area, that you add some storm drainage there. This section here is one where they are undersized, and so that's a recommendation to increase what you've got in those areas. This one is undersized. This is an area that's got not much there as well, so it's lack of facility. It's basically turnpike streets, and if there's pipes in the ground, they're probably not doing much for you as it is. And so we're trying this to the system that was installed a few years ago in that. And then over here, the last couple of pieces down in the southwest part, you saw down here that there are some areas that you saw some red pipes, and that's a problem because basically, again, that C basin is really large, and you're taking in a lot of area there. So we're doing two things. One is this area here is also not very well served, undersized, got some dishes in this area here. Eventually that should get piped and done that way. What we're doing here is a little bit different. In a lot of ways, it's actually restoring kind of a historical pattern. This area just kept getting pushed this way. So in this area, we're actually recommending that you move some water. And so when you subtract this water and take it out of going from that way, size it correctly, move it over here, you will relieve your conditions or your issues over in that part. So that's really the key to what we found in doing this stormwater report. Not a lot of problems. This project is pretty spendy. I'm going to get to numbers on the next one. And before I even mention the numbers or show you the numbers, they're in the report. Nobody knows what to do with numbers right now. Just this morning in our engineering staff meeting, somebody was telling a story about a project that we just bid. And then I have another story about that, and it's like the price came in triple for what we were expecting. They were asking some questions about a piece of pipe on another project, and the contractor said, no, so what would, talk to a contractor they knew. What would you say? And we were thinking, X, and the contractor says, oh, that's 4X. And we're just going, things today are insane. There's no other way to describe it. So what numbers do we use? We have numbers in the report. I put those numbers in a few months ago as we were finalizing some things. I can bump them by 10%. I can bump them by 50%. I can bump them by 100%. It's really hard to say what. I mean, a lot of people are saying, the contractors are really busy, and everything in construction is just really, really. I mean, there's a lot of bids going out where they're not even getting bids. People are advertising for bids, going through the whole bidding process, and contractors are so busy they're not bidding, or they're just going to throw a number in, and they're going to be double or triple the price and say, we'll find somebody to do the job if we get it, but they're not looking for the work. So 6 months, a year ago, those are the numbers that we would be looking at. 6 months from now, if the economy all of a sudden goes, maybe we come back closer to these numbers. I don't know. These have historical basis. Nothing has much use now. I don't know what else to say about that. I mean, they're the best numbers that we can put based on the things that we've seen in the past. We're telling our clients right now, if you can wait, wait. If you have a project that you just absolutely don't have to go out to bid with right now, you're just gonna be shocked at how much you're gonna pay, because there's so much money in the market right now. A lot of it is that federal funding from the COVID relief and all that other stuff and all kinds of things. There's just so much money in the market right now that everybody's just bidding everybody else up. So I don't know what else to say about that. So that's, if you want to see the breakdown in the numbers, those are also in the report. I won't even pretend to try to go through those there. The only thing that's relevant there is that we do include construction, contingency, engineering, legal and admin, etc. One other item that I want to mention is, if you look at these, you may have noticed, the report talks about a priority one, but I don't have any. You don't have any. And our characterization of priority one is something that needs to get done right now. And as I mentioned early on, you don't have those kinds of things. Your biggest considerations are some areas where you've got some older things, they're still functioning, you need to budget for them, you need to put things together and move forward with those particular projects. But in some sense, the system is actually kind of managing itself, so that, and this is one of the things, is always start at fixing the system at the bottom, because if you fix the system from the top down, all of a sudden you're going to bring more water faster, as we talked about a little bit earlier, to the point where you stopped that project. And now all of a sudden you're going to find that you have a problem at the bottom end of the repair. So you want to get your pipes in better shape, larger sizes, starting from the bottom up, so that when you fix the top, the bottom is there and is ready to handle it. Any questions?
Ray, you mentioned we don't have any priority ones right now. We do have some SDCs we're collecting on a reimbursement basis for prior projects that we have a fund for. Because of budget law, we really need to wait till next fiscal year to start a storm drain fund and start spending and or collecting operating revenues for that fund. Is that an issue waiting until the next fiscal year from your perspective as the engineer?
Oh, no. Again, if you had priority one, even a priority one project would be something that you need to do in the next couple of years.
Okay.
You have nothing that even fits in that category. Priority two is, yes, budget, start putting money away and try to get it, I don't know, whenever you can, next 5 years, something like that.
Okay.
And priority threes are typically more development driven, or areas that are just lower concern, and you get to them when you get to them, and you might not get to them for 10, 15, or 20 years. This is intended to be things that you're looking at over the next 20 years.
Okay.
This is good,
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
very good.
Very easy to understand.
Thank you very much. Yes.
Yeah, just to say thanks, Ray, for putting that together. We've been working on this for probably a year and a half. Taking us some time to put together, a lot of background work, and this will come to council every year.
Okay, so let's move on to our last item, which is 4B, parade permit ordinance. See if we can get Lori up there, huh?
Hey, Lori, you still with us?
I am.
Hey, Lori.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Hanging in for quite a while. All right. Yeah. So, well, you want to introduce us, Michelle, or is Michelle? I can see back to somebody. I think it's Michelle.
Yeah. Well, this is Lori Cooper from the city attorney's office, and you had reviewed the parade ordinance back a while back, I forget exactly when, and now she's ready to go over it again and see what your input is now that she's made some recommendations regarding the parade permit.
Great, thank you, Michelle. And has the counselor had a chance to look at the memo that I sent?
Yes.
Yes.
Great. So I'll just quickly go through. Really, it's the second page of the memo that I just outlined the changes. And as you all remember, this was initiated by the Michelle Bivens situation with the 4th of July parade a couple of years ago. And as part of the settlement agreement, the city agreed to take a look at the code and see if it needed any updating. So I spoke with you all at a work session a few months back and got some direction from you. So what I did was just kind of hone in on what I feel are the most important things that need to be changed, or basically the period of time prior to a parade that somebody needs to submit an application. And your code currently reads 30 days, I believe. And yeah, and there have been some court cases over the years since 1981 when this code was first enacted that held 30 days as a little survey of several cities in Oregon, and it ranged from 10 to 20 days that cities require somebody to submit a parade permit. So I sort of cut the baby in half and said 15 days. But that's, up for discussion with the council and the city manager to see if that's workable. So that's the first major thing. The second thing, I added a section on spontaneous gatherings and events, because again, there's been case law over the years that the city can't require a permit for a spontaneous gathering so long as it's not affecting public safety or traffic or things like that, blocking streets, but to allow people to gather in public space to protest or celebrate or exchange information about something that may be happening locally or nationally, and that's in the news. So you'll see I have a section on that. And then, finally I added some language about indemnity. I think it's a good idea for the code to include a requirement that somebody who's going to have a parade or an event sign something that they indemnify the city from anything. If somebody gets hurt or something, they try to blame the city for the problem, that this would help the city defend itself. And in the same vein, it's insurance. A lot of cities require parade organizers and other public event organizers to provide insurance. As I wrote in my memo, it's not an absolute requirement. It's not an absolute requirement, but it's a good idea. And maybe you all can talk with your risk manager, and I don't even know if you have a risk manager and or insurer, and just see if that's something the city wants to think about doing. The code section that I put in there about insurance has some process for exemptions, because as you might imagine, there's some nonprofit groups and other groups that may have a hard time getting insurance. So there's some criteria that, if in the city's view it's not going to be a very risky parade or event, then you wouldn't absolutely have to require insurance. So anyway, those are basically the 4 areas. You'll see in the proposed code amendments that I forwarded, there's a strike through of language that I'm recommending be removed, which is not much, just the 30 days mainly. And then the language that I'm proposing be included, it is in bold. goal for you to see that that's what I'm recommending be included or changed. So anyway, that's sort of a quick overview. One thing I do want to say, when I was reading this over again tonight in preparation for this meeting, it's a little confusing because we talk about parades. Your code currently talks about parades, and that's great. But then some of the new language I put in about different, about the spontaneous activities or the insurance refers to parades and or events. So we don't really define what a community event is, but I thought maybe we could have a discussion about that. I don't know if you all have like block parties or community events where you block off streets and have festivals and things like that. So these code sections could apply to that kind of stuff too, and I can definitely tweak it a little bit depending on what the council thinks. And I'll just stop talking right now and see if you have any input or questions or whatever.
I have a question. On the 15-day, I can hear myself talking and it's distracting. On the 15-day timeline for a parade permit, it needs to be submitted to the city council for review. Can that be to the city manager instead of the city council?
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense,
Okay.
Michelle. Yeah, because right now your code reads city council, and I think that could be changed throughout where it says the city manager. If the council's comfortable with delegating that authority to you, I think that makes sense. So we'll be a lot more.
We don't meet often enough.
Yeah, that's what I'm afraid of, is that they wouldn't be able to meet often enough for us to actually present it to them.
Well, and we haven't
Yeah.
been,
And
we haven't been operating this way. I mean, I've never known applications to go to city council.
Well, when I first came here, we didn't have a special events policy, and they did come to the city council. And I remember it was very difficult, and we talked about having to have special meetings of the city council, and so I remember that there was at least one incident where we had to have the parade go to the city council for approval, and I think you had to have a special meeting or something like that in order to meet the timeline. And so then we made up the policy, and then the policy gave authority to the city manager, which kind of doesn't go according to our ordinance.
Yeah, so I would agree with you, Michelle, that the city council and throughout on the next page, D and E and F, city council decision within 5 days, that there's no way that the city council can do all of that in a timely manner. And then under spontaneous events, we have the same thing. They have to notice the city council 4 hours prior to the activity. So the city council can't do anything with 4 hours notice.
No.
We have to have for an emergency meeting, we have to have 24 hours notice, special meeting, something like that. So the city council can't do anything with 4 hours of notice. So I think all that needs to be reviewed and probably change the city manager. But even there, 4 hours notice, there's a lot of hours that the city manager is not available, evenings, weekends. So if they want to, if on Friday night they decide something's happened around the nation and they're all going to gather Saturday morning out here, there's going to be no notice.
Yeah.
They're just going to show up on Saturday morning.
And they have a right, actually, they have a constitutional right to do that, so long as they don't obstruct the right of way. So they would, if they want to obstruct the right of way, they better find me and give me notice. Otherwise, they have the right to assemble and demonstrate.
It says if
Practical.
Practical.
Practical, yeah.
Right. And let me just speak to the issue about having city council. I totally agree with y'all. I just didn't want to change that until we talked, just kind of because I didn't know what your practice was. But I figured, like I said, this code is from 1981, and I think that was how things worked then. I've worked with a lot of cities where they still have that sort of language in their code, but it's been over the years become policy, or the council has delegated authority to administer the code to the city manager. And you don't need to say that explicitly, but I think it helps if the code is, since we're changing the code anyway, change it, make it, more streamlined. streamline, make more sense that it would be the city manager, not the city council. So I will do that.
So then does it make sense that an appeal would still go to our municipal judge? Because the municipal judge meets once a month. So there would probably have to be a special contact with the municipal judge to come down and hear an appeal, especially if it's on a timely matter, 15 days. And it's rejected, there's 10 days before the event now, or 5 days before the event. So does it make sense for the municipal judge to be the one to decide on the appeal?
Well, there has to be someone to appeal.
When I've seen it, they're not, and what I've seen in many other cities is it goes to the council for an appeal. And, you know, you might not want that, but if you do, if that's something that's totally workable. Again, though, if you all meet once a month or twice a month, I don't remember, probably once a
Twice a
month.
month.
But only once a month for business.
For
We'd have-
business meeting.
we'd have to call a
Yes, you'd
special
have to
meeting
call
at the
a
council.
meeting.
Yeah, it'd have to be a special meeting of the council.
And the emergency declaration, there's parameters around what you can use to call an emergency meeting, and I don't know that an appeal or a special event meets the parameters for an emergency meeting. You can call a special meeting in council.
Well, right, if this code, we could change this code that would say if it does not fall within the time frame for a regular business meeting of the council, doesn't fall within the time frame that you shall call a special meeting within 5 days or whatever. I've seen codes like that. So you don't need to worry about that emergency meeting stuff if you spell in your code. But,
Okay.
you know, I think it's more workable to go to the council for an appeal than it is to the municipal judge. For an appeal.
What
At
do
least
you all
that's
think?
my experience working with most.
Judge is one person, council is,
Yeah.
you know.
Seven.
Could it not say that it, to the next available court date for the municipal judge?
No, because that might be after their event.
Yeah.
Does it have to be a court
Right.
date to, for the judge to meet, or can that be a one-off thing?
The judge can meet him when he wants to hear an appeal. He doesn't have to wait till a court date.
Oh, okay.
That would be a conversation with the judge.
That would be a conversation, but that would be something that if it came up, I would have to call the judge and tell the judge that we have an appeal and we need you to hear it, and we need you to come and have a special court date.
Tomorrow. And it could be down to a timeline now that we've gone through the appeal, the process, you've rejected that, there's 5 days before the event.
Right,
So now it's gotta happen tomorrow, the next day.
right, the appeal has got to happen before the event.
What if the judge said vacation?
We have a pro tem.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
That seems to be the more timely way to do it. Because with the council,
Yeah.
then we have to call a special meeting and we have to give 24 hours notice, so
And you have to have a quorum.
you've gotta have a quorum. And so if it's a summertime event, what do y'all think?
Was my train of thought. As I was looking at this.
What's your train of thought?
Well, essentially, we weren't going to be able to, first of all, I'm really glad the manager Amber brought up having city manager have the responsibility first. Does that make sense? And then when it came to the appeal thing, I still think that the judge thing was a better alternative than the council, so.
I agree with that. Municipal judge is a way better option. As a third party, especially if it's something that is, say, for example, parade, which is kind of closely related to the council, it should be separate.
And then there's a timing in here. F talked about, which would now be the city manager's decision within 5 days after the review. And then under the appeal, the municipal judge must schedule the hearing no later than 10 days after the filing of the written appeal. So now, we've already really exceeded the 15 days. But you got 5 days and no later than 10 days. You could be on day 16 or 17 now.
Right, but I don't think you have to have they don't have to have the permit in hand within 15 days. It's just that they need to get a response from the city within 15 days. So I think how the courts look at that kind of thing.
Turn something in 15 days ahead of time, manager ever has to review it pretty quick. And if you decide no, then you gotta turn around and get a hold of the judge pretty quick,
Right,
because they're gonna wanna be notified they can or they cannot have their event.
right, so it's really not a 15-day period. It's a 15-day period until they get their permit. So if I don't have 15 days to make that decision, I have a very short turnaround time to make the decision, because if I decide no, for some reason, like they're going to not have all of their ducks in a row for the parade, then they have the right to appeal that to the municipal judge. So I would have to do that. It's less than a 15-day period then for me.
Yep.
Question, if ODOT is involved in that, then that would be one of those ducks, right?
Good luck. Yeah, they better have ODOT on board before they come in asking for a permit.
Because if I remember, as I read it correctly, that anything that involves ODOT or going through has to be a separate application process to ODOT.
Yes, it does. And so if there's any state highways involved, they would have to have that permission ahead of time.
Don has a question way in the back.
If your appeal is to the judge, and you have, let's say the judge denies it, and so they go ahead and do it, or something else happens and it later goes to a fine or something like that, does that now take the judge out of the chain of judicial action afterwards? And if it does, I guess it's just something to think about if that's what you're waiting.
I wouldn't think so, because it becomes then a matter of an ordinance, and the judge has still got authority over making fines and ordinances. At that point,
And if it does, the judge that hasn't done the appeal, the pro tem judge will hear it.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
Yeah, if the defendant would try to argue that they, that there's conflict of interest with the judge, then you could use a pro tem. But I do think whoever said it earlier, it's two separate things. The first review is really an administrative appeal to the judge. The second thing would be, like you have in Ms. Bivens, a violation of an ordinance, basically, a violation, not a criminal, but it's a municipal court violation. So I think we could work our way through that in the very rare event that this would happen. And then talking about the timeline too, I think what you're trying to do here is balance people's constitutional rights with public safety. I think anybody who's organizing a major event or parade is going to quickly realize that they have, they're not going to win their argument like Bivens tried to. If they try to shove something through that doesn't have the proper, ODOT approvals and the police and everybody else. So, typically what I see in other towns when there's a big event, a big festival that they annually have, the organizers start months in advance to get that all those, I's dotted and T's crossed. So what we're looking for here and why we're here, is because of, I don't want to say the word troublemaker, but somebody who didn't really want to go by the rules. And so that's why you need to have the rules that balance the constitutional rights with the administrative tasks that you have and the public safety that you're trying to ensure. So that's why I think these code sections do that to the best of your ability and based on current case law and other things I researched. So
I think what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to separate our events policy from our parade permit. And the events policy will be something that is that we still have to have 45 days where, they are supposed to check with Public Works, they're supposed to check with the fire department, they're supposed to check with the neighborhood, they're supposed to check with all of that event policy is still in place, that they have to do all this, but the permit policy, they get the permit after 13 or 15 days prior to their event. So they still have to we're going to have to change the way that we interact with everybody, because what we did before was you come in and you file for the permit 45 days ahead of time, and then you prove to us, you have 45 days to prove to us that you have done your due diligence on that, and then we give you the permit. So the permit is going to have to be separated out now.
They have to prove that when they apply.
Yeah, when they
They
apply
have
for the
insurance
permit, they have all of those things.
Everything that she's listed, I like that change.
That's correct, yeah. So I looked at your code and I didn't see anything about a special event, so you guys must just have that in a written policy that.
Yeah, I sent you the policy.
Yeah.
I did send you the policy, but it's not in code, it's just a policy.
All right.
Because that actually really ties in, so I was looking at, we have our parades and processions, and that's a piece of municipal code. Then we have our events, it's kind of under miscellaneous permits, and that's in our development code. And we kind of have our airport rules and regulations and kind of address special events. You mentioned that at the last council meeting, and then we've got the policy itself. So my concern, if there's stuff that needs to be in code, I would like to see us extract that, kind of like what you're saying, because I don't think that spontaneous events applies to parades. We shouldn't have a spontaneous parade. So
Yeah, you can.
It's a constitutional right if somebody wants to march in front of City Hall.
and that's the other question I had
They
is,
just can't block the right of way.
Endanger the public.
okay, so we
But like, so they could have a parade that went down the sidewalk and crossed at the crosswalks, but they have to make sure that they're not infringing on the right of way.
so with that, I think it would be really good to spell out and make sure that people understand what the definition is of a parade and what does require a permit versus what doesn't.
100 more persons is considered a parade that requires a permit, or 10 or more vehicles.
Right. Yep.
So it's there. So a person can have a spontaneous parade with 99 people, which we kind of discussed last time.
9 vehicles.
9 vehicles.
So long as they don't block the right of way.
So long as they keep moving.
That's right.
They can be in the road as long as they keep on moving.
That's right. And they stop at the stop signs and they obey all the traffic signals. and
Like
they-
the high schoolers when they come to town on graduation and honk horns and all that. They don't need a
Or
parade.
homecoming.
Or homecoming. They're
Or
stopping
with the
at stop signs. They're
The 2020 parade was a little bit more along that line because it was not a very organized event. It was very loose, right? So I know it's,
They violated a lot of code, but they
Oh.
violated a lot of code.
okay, we're talking
Oh,
about.
you're talking about the one that was.
The very first.
The very first, right. They did not
It
violate.
fell right into these parameters.
Right.
good, yes, it did.
Right.
Yeah.
So that was a spontaneous parade that was acceptable.
Okay.
No. Okay.
Okay, so are we in agreement? We want to change city council to city manager and all these openings?
Yes.
And that leave the timeline the same, go with 15 days at the beginning instead of 30 days. And keep the municipal judge as the appeal. Any questions on indemnity or insurance requirements? I had a question about the city's risk manager. That comes up under B. If the city's risk manager determines blah, 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 then it does not present substantial significant likelihood, then they may give a written waiver of the insurance requirements.
That's
And-
me,
So you're the city risk manager.
yes.
Should that be spelled out, the city manager, and then in parentheses, city risk manager, parentheses, city manager, so it's clear who this is talking about?
We don't have a risk manager.
Or should it just
Right.
be city
You haven't
manager?
titled it all. You don't have, I'll just put city manager then, yeah. And, you know, I would advise that you run that by your insurer too, you know, like I said earlier, I think that they deal with this kind of thing all the time, so they'd be able to give you some advice on if that's advisable or not.
Okay.
Does the indemnity, or were you done? Sorry.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, does the indemnity and insurance requirement piece of it apply to special events outside of parades?
It should. We ask that if you're going to have a special event, you have insurance. It's part of our special event policy.
Yeah, let me bring up an issue about that. So the reason we're looking at this code is because of the Bivens issue, and then it kind of, expanded, rightfully so, to looking at special events as well. So it's, we need to get this done by February. That's quite a ways away still. So the parade part of it. So you all could give a go ahead to change the parade permit language and include indemnity insurance and all that, and then we can codify the special event policy. And we'll have to talk about where that goes. I know in a lot of cities it goes in like the chapter that talks about public parks and public property. In Medford, it's in the chapter that talks about streets, which is kind of odd. But I guess kind of a lot of the events have to do with closing off streets or on parks and things like that. So anyway, that's just I'm just throwing out that if we can get this all done by February, that's fine. But I think we need to pay attention to the settlement agreement that we need to have the parade part at least done by February. And that means adopted by you and enacted into the code by February.
Under 10.
Actually, let me backtrack on that, because all we said was we would look at it. We didn't, the settlement agreement did not do anything, so yeah.
That's
Yeah,
correct.
I'm just saying that the longer this lingers,
Yeah, they don't actually have to do anything other than what they've already done.
Right. That's
So
right.
under 10.30, permit revocable, it again says the council may revoke a parade permit. Now, in this situation, the city manager has agreed, we've given a parade permit, and then circumstances show the parade can no longer be conducted, so something's come up. And now is this where the city manager comes back and says, I've given this parade permit, but some new information come out, I think it's not safe, and then the city council takes action to revoke it?
I would think I could revoke the permit if I think that public safety cannot be followed.
Okay,
I agree. Yeah.
so let's change the language there to city manager again. Okay,
Okay.
If somebody wanted to appeal that, would it make sense to, does it then just automatically fall back to the judge or municipal judge? Okay, great.
so do we want to look at spontaneous events as well since we're tackling this? Keep going? Yes? Spontaneous events. So again, this is the city council, so we're going to strike that. All the language here that says city council will be city manager. And what do we mean by arterial street? Like Main Street, like Fifth Street?
Yeah.
They're in the transportation safety plan.
Okay, as defined, okay.
Either or.
So does that all look good, everybody? Submitted and reviewed not less than 15 business days. And so is there anything on the back page? F again refers to city council. Shall have the discretion to waive departmental cost recovery. That would be city manager once again. Jim,
We talked about the term waive, and Michelle, I would think that there may be a better term for waiving costs. Recovery. Because we've talked in the past about waiving permit fees and stuff. I think we look at more of it as a donation from the city. I don't know if that's the right word to use in this context.
I see what you mean, because the costs don't go away.
Right.
They don't get waived. They are still costs, but they're borne by the city instead of by the individual.
The city would absorb.
I think, yeah.
Yeah.
I think absorb.
do we have other language someplace to talk about how the city covers the cost rather than? What have we done this with? Was it with the Hope Restore project or?
Yeah, with Hope Restore.
We waived the cost for the winter festival for the chamber, because they would have to rent the community center for 24-hour periods, and the cost is exorbitant, so we waive the cost for that, and that truly is a waived cost, because there are no costs associated with that.
Do we waive the cost for the veterans to do the twice-a-year celebration
For the
out
permit.
here, so that they're not paying the permit fee?
That's correct.
And because that's where we had a conversation before about not using the word waive, but
Right.
something different.
Well, but those are waived costs, because there is no cost associated with those events. This is a real cost.
It would be Cliff's time to put up barriers and have his folks involved, so it actually is.
Or any kind of repairs, or, yeah. Or it says that we can't do overtime pay for the sheriff, but it would be overtime pay for any kind of damages or any kind of cost associated with the event.
I think I kind of like the term absorb, because it does still show that there is a cost. In effect, the city is going to absorb those costs. They're not going to seek.
Or even assume, the city will assume the cost.
Oh, I like that term too.
Yeah, I like that.
Well, I would point out this whole section talks about recovery, so it would be quite a bit, I mean, we could reword all that, but all this is saying is you're waiving your ability to recover those, you have the right to recover those costs under this section, but you have the discretion to waive that right to recover, basically, so, for what it's worth.
We'll let the attorney wordsmith it. To waive the recovery costs. They have words.
Okay.
That's what you get paid all the dollars for, right? So that's just the right word.
That's right.
Right.
Stay not so late.
So is there anything else here, council, that jumped out at you that we missed?
I have one that I just thought of. So under the, in the very beginning, when we were talking about consisting of 100 or more person or 10 or more vehicles under prohibited activity, does vehicles incorporate not RVs, ATVs and tractors and that kind of thing?
I would say so, but we don't have it defined in this section. I don't know if you're talking, code talks about other defines vehicle elsewhere in your code, but I think we could look to what the state statutes say about a vehicle, and I think it's probably a motorized vehicle. We could say that, a motorized vehicle. But you could also have strong carriages, so yeah, that's the thing, you start pulling this thread, and you could really have a whole big definition section if we wanted.
I like having motorized vehicles. That gives a little more definition.
It does.
If you got a little go-kart you're motoring down the road, well, you're obstructing traffic with it.
I've seen ATVs go down the school
Yeah.
on property, so.
And horses aren't allowed on Oregon Avenue.
That's already in our process.
Right.
Except during the parade.
They're not allowed on Oregon Avenue unless you have a waiver, and we provide a waiver.
So with all that input, do we feel like we have a good document here? Be worked over again and brought back to us, probably another council session to take one more look before we decide if we're going to bring it to a vote? And are there some things that we need to pull out and separate it out?
So you want it brought back to a work session?
You want it brought back to the work session, or you feel like you're comfortable with whatever Lori comes up with that we can bring right back and bring to the council meeting to vote on?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, and you can always debate it at the council meeting, and if you get public input or whatever, and we can, you can amend it at a council session, and then I'll go back and fix it up to whatever y'all vote, to adopt.
Yeah, I would agree with you, though. Another time.
Well, it's September. So if we do it again in October, we still could pass it before the end of the year.
We
Yeah.
could get, lucky and like what we see, or we could throw it back as amended.
Mhm.
So we
Right.
we could save, some time by taking our chances and hopefully that it's something that we vote on.
Yeah, make a move and then make a motion.
Or as amended.
As amended, yeah. If we have discussion and.
Do you have any opinion, Michelle?
I would go with whatever the city council feels comfortable with at this point. It sounds to me like there's two different ideas, and I'm not sure which direction the city council wants to go. So,
The two different ideas, meaning another work session, look at it again,
yeah,
or do it
at the next city
decision,
council.
and we can, I mean, you can vote it down in the city council meeting, you can amend it, you can adopt it, you have a couple different options. The work session just means we get beat around another time, September, we still have.
Board's time.
You'll have time.
We still have 3 months, this
Another
council
work
will
session
be.
means more intense
Yes,
time.
we have time. So
What do you want to
what does the
do?
majority want to
So
do?
let's just go around and
Yeah.
take a little poll. How many would like to see it come back, another work session to be massaged over in a work session environment?
I would say.
Or, okay,
I
fine,
guess that's
okay.
what we're doing then.
So if you can have it, our next work session will be October 24, October 24.
Okay.
What did Grace say back here? She's our new person who keeps them track. October 24. But we need to have it to Grace by October 12th to be included. Right? So October 12th is when we need to have it ready to our city reporter.
Okay,
Does that work,
that's
Michelle?
doable.
Okay,
And then we'll put it on the October work session agenda.
okay,
Okay?
sounds good.
Thank you, Lori, very, very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. So council, I think that does it, doesn't it? Well, we got them before 9.
We did.
Pretty good. That was a lot of stuff.
We moved on tonight. So thank you all very, very much. Thanks for your service. Yeah, we got a lot covered.